Hello, and welcome to episode 25 of My Dog Will Eat My Face. I wish to apologize on the get-go. I do have a new doggy now, and actually he is, well, for better words, or a better word I should say, a puppy. And you might hear squeaks and squawks and yelps and weird noises from him here and there in the background throughout today's podcast, even though I wish to cover something actually a little bit serious. Hopefully it works out. If not, I'll have to try to find another way of getting this done without totally isolating the pooch. I really don't want to do that. So we'll see how this works out. Anyway, moving on. I wanted to share today actually an online discussion I had regarding heart failure, which is, of course, the disease that I suffer from. I do occasionally pursue other sources online and discuss people's fears, what they're going through with their disease, what the similarities, differences are between their symptoms and mine, and just to kind of have a better understanding of where I'm at versus a lot of my, I guess, comrades out there that are suffering from the same disease, and also any in hospice if there are any. And I wanted to share some of that finding with my listeners today. It is, frankly, a serious topic to me. So hopefully the puppy doesn't ruin it by adding excessive levity to it. Perhaps he'll just add just the right amount of levity to it that is needed to move forward without defenestrating oneself. But be that as it may, I did several communications online and several discussion groups with other sufferers of heart failure. And my first response was kind of strange to the questions that I was receiving. And the questions I got, I guess, were kind of typical for what you might otherwise expect for someone who is theoretically dying. One man asked me point blank, what's it like to be dying? And my immediate response back to him was, I don't know, you tell me. To you, what's it like to be dying? And I wasn't trying to be coy. I wasn't trying to be, I don't know what the right word is, badgering him or anything like that. But quite the opposite. I've always held to the fact that life is a sexually transmitted disease that is indeed terminal. I've said this since even before I got really sick with heart failure. So in my mind, we're all sick. We're all going to die, obviously. That's true for sure. And so I asked him, what's it like for him to be dying? I didn't get an answer, unfortunately. He kind of ignored the question. I think he missed my point. And that actually underscores my point. I think the vast majority of people out there, and this is what makes my podcast so different, is that they honestly don't like to discuss death. They don't like to discuss their own mortality. They don't appreciate discussing it with others. They don't even, beyond talking about it, they don't even like to apply thought to death or their own mortality. Now, in my case, I'm in a very different position because I've been in a dire position since time immemorial, since this is coming from a congenital disease. This is a position that I've had to deal with my whole life. And that's why I've had things like my silly phrase that I shared earlier to help keep myself, I don't know, jovial about it. And this is why I've always been acutely aware of my mortality. And I know for a fact that that's very unique. Most people don't ever come close to that. They don't even come close to wanting to discuss it, let alone understand it. I even remember when I was a little kid, my parents would refer to my doctors at the time as being very gloomy at the time. Very gloomy with respect to my prognosis since I was a baby. My parents would nickname my cardiologist, who was my cardiologist as a child, as Dr. Gloom, I think it was. Or maybe it was Dr. Doom. I think it was the prior. The latter sounds like a Marvel character. Dr. Doom versus Judge Dredd. Anyways, I think it was Dr. Gloom. I could be wrong, though, slightly. I don't know. I'm not far off, if I am off, though. So, I did add to this questioner that I only have comfort in knowing that I lived my life well. And this is key. I don't think I would have had this quality if I wasn't actually aware of my own mortality. I didn't skim through life. I didn't just get by. I lived pretty hard. I worked hard. I worked very hard because I worked with this condition. And I worked to accomplish what I wanted to have, including the tools necessary to live the life that I liked. I doubt I would have done any of the things that I had done if I was not acutely aware of my own mortality. That's just a fact. I think quite the antithesis, the basis of so many bold decisions that I made and moves that I made to make my life better and to improve it as much as possible, and as many opportunities as I seized, despite the underlying fear, or fears I should say, honestly, or difficulties. I still try to overcome those and try to live my life as best as I could and to overcome. And that's what today's podcast is about. Not just that I overcame a lot. I think I've settled that and put that to bed. But I really want to talk about in this podcast the difference between me and others. Me and my experience and what I've gone through versus what others and their experience has been like. Because I think it is so dramatically different. And it really clicked with me that it is so different in this one conversation that I wanted to share that with my listeners. And it taught me in these conversations, I'll lay it out right away. I'll kind of lead with a spoiler, but these were the moments that were there that created me. And I wouldn't want me any other way. So with that being said, let's continue and analyze how else this conversation went with this other person, who so too did suffer from heart failure, I should add. And how better of an understanding I got from that to share with you as to just how bizarre my experience was versus that of the common man. So we'll start and go from there. So, as I was saying, I feel comfort in that I did the best I could, at least, in my life. I was given the chance, and I did it as best as I could. And I still am trying my best. General George Smith Patton said, "Do not take counsel of your fears." This is an early quote that I memorized in middle school. This is back when I first read his diary from World War II. If anyone wants to pick it up, it was published under the name War as I Knew It by George Patton and was published by his wife after his sudden death in a car accident at the end of the war. And I still say that quote to myself to this day and live by it. An example is already been alluded to. I got a new dog. Sure, I could be paralyzed with fear. What happens if I die and the dog is alone or goes to shelter? At least I haven't ignored these issues, but rather, where I could, I've tried to solve them, make it an acceptable risk. And that's just it. It's an acceptable risk that I have taken. He drives me crazy. He's not fully house trained, so that's a troubling part. But he's very sweet, and he's very loyal, and he's very loving. And I knew that the latter, that is, his lovingness and his loyalty, would outweigh his occasional accidents. And this is still in practice now as I am dying. This analysis of risk and reward as I illustrate just what I did here with a new dog. And I've taken to heart that phrase. Don't take counsel of your fears. I know so many people that don't do things, that are stuck, that are just completely paralyzed because they're afraid of any number of different things. And it's one thing to be afraid and to look to resolve it, but it's another to be afraid and then just walk away and say, well, can't be done, sorry. And hey, that happens. That's happened to me, certainly. But it's far and few between. And I do that because I don't take counsel on my fears. They're just things to be overcome. They're just opportunities. And when I think of all the risks I've taken with traveling, the opportunities I've taken, as I saw them, I've been flatly told no parent today would let their kid go through what I went through. And that makes me sad, because a lot of that made me. Again, it brought into being my personality and myself. And I like myself. I'd like to stay being myself. So, my approach has been very different from most. I don't cling to the fear. I don't listen to it, except for as an opportunity to overcome and to hopefully go into a venture that will improve my life, either short term or long term. And yeah, here I am in hospice care, adopting a new dog. And I did that because I don't take counsel of my fears. As Patton said, I moved to find ways to resolve them and decided that the risk is worth it, because even though I'm dying, I am lonely. Especially when my last dog, my best friend, passed away. He's not a replacement. He's just another being that I can love. And that gives me a lot day to day. And I promise, I've got the best cuddle buddy right now of all you. He's a very good, cuddly little guy. He still struggles with peeing and going in the house. That's an issue. But beyond that, he's very good. He's very happy. He's very loyal. I'm looking at him right now and he's taking a little snooze. And I get more out of it than the expense. So, my advice to anyone is to take something from George Patton. Take a lot of things from George Patton, actually. Pick up his book, it's amazing. But if you were to start somewhere, start with, do not take counsel of your fears. And that will be a good start. I promise you. Moving along, I further shared that I never ever have been afraid of death. And this was in response to his direct question. He actually asked if I ever get afraid. And the short answer is no, not really. And that's honest as well. I've never feared the state of death my whole life. And I still don't. Why would I? Whatever there is how I see it. My death or understanding of it or lack of understanding of it won't matter in the end. We all get to find out. So, why bother my time worrying about that? I just honestly never, ever bothered with that sort of detail. Maybe that makes me weird, but it really just doesn't occur to me. It doesn't occur to me. I mean, sure, I've been afraid of the processes of death. You know, like if it's painful or something like that, that sounds terrible. And, you know, the way they execute people and things like that, that always, you know, gets me wigged out, so to speak. It makes me nervous. And I too have also had those oh no moments that we've all had. You know, if you're in an airplane and you're landing at Chicago Midway in a snowstorm and you come in within just a few feet of the buildings like you do when you land there. And then as you're doing that, all of a sudden there's a big drop in the airplane from turbulence, and you kind of have a oh crap moment. Is this it? Am I going to die flying into a building? Yeah, I've had those moments. We all have those moments, like on traffic. We all have those moments where we think the guy is going to hit us, and then he doesn't, or something. So, you know, certainly I've had those moments where I feared being dead, you know, as an act that I'd rather not have happened to me. But otherwise, I've never had any extra material fear of death. I've never, ever in my life feared the afterlife or feared what happens after death. I don't think there's an afterlife, and so for me that's easy, I guess. I think when I'm dead, I'm dead. It's just, there's nothing there. It's just blackness. There's nothing. That's what I expect. So there's really no reason for me to be afraid of that. And I've never had a fear of hell. You know, I've heard stupid religious people. I'm not saying all religious people are stupid, by the way, but I've heard stupid religious people and other religious people would also call them stupid, who say the atheists conjure this mentality just because they want to avoid hell. And it's so stupid. I've never had the concept of hell. I've never once been afraid of hell. I'm not trying to escape hell. If hell were real, it's going to get me whether I believe in it or not. That's kind of what I see. And I don't think it's real. So I've never, ever been afraid of it. And so I guess I differ from some people in that way. I know there's a lot of people that are religious and they do fear hell. But I'm definitely not one of those guys. And that makes it lucky for me. Because when I'm dead, I'm dead. I don't have to worry about anything. done. It's over. The only thing I care about after my death are things like my life insurance going to my family that I wanted to go to. Like, I fought my former employer viciously to make sure they cover my family for my life insurance. And that was a hard struggle. I mean, that took many a phone calls and many emails and many a discussions and many a fights to finally win my way for my former employer to recognize that they have to provide the appropriate life insurance that I have and what's the word I'm looking for, and distribute it to my beneficiaries. That's all. So yeah, that was actually a huge fight for me for some odd reason. But it was a huge fight for me. One that I won because I was right. And I was doing the legal thing and they weren't. What they were doing was absolutely illegal. I have no qualm saying that. So, I can't help but wonder how many other employees of theirs left the company and got completely screwed over with their life insurance. I mean, that's a scary thought. That's a really scary thought. But anyway, yeah, that's my only fear after death, is that the material things that occur when I'm not here to partake and to ensure their delivery occur, and to make sure that my estate goes to the right people. That's why I have an active will. I think everyone should have an active will. On top of that, so that's my only fear after death. And he also did reply, that is, this person who I was talking to online, that his sickness hit right when his life was starting to improve, including proposing to his girlfriend. And he said he couldn't live more, as he put it. And I can definitely relate to that. And though for him, this is something that's made him really sad, because he felt like his life was finally in the right place and at the right time. And I can relate to that as well. When this hit, I've had my issue my whole life, first of all. But when I got kicked to hospice care, when I went to home hospice, I was in the center of a long personal career that had lasted 20 years. And to have that stolen from me like that was, and still is, dreadful. So in some ways I can reflect and relate to what this individual is going through, because he doesn't want to lose his career and his girlfriend, or maybe she's now his fiancée. I asked if she said yes. He's not replied. I hope she said yes. I hope for his sake she said yes. I don't wish ill on anyone. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I wish kindness and a good life on most anyone I meet. But anyway, I can relate to this though because I lost my career essentially at its pinnacle, and that hurts tremendously and is a massive void in my life. And so with that said, I could definitely relate. God, I can't talk today. I could definitely relate to this individual who I spoke to online. And again, I hope his girlfriend said yes. And I hope he got to keep his career. But to be honest, I just don't know, because he has not replied to my questions to those effect. I wanted to throw out a quick correction in the last segment with respect to the audio portion that seemed to drop off and be I don't know what it quite was, and I apologize. Also, my dog is squeaking in the background. But it was really just a moment where I was saying that my fear of death is not of anything material in any sense. So there's any post-death material fear. And that's really the summation of what that brief audio disturbance was. But the rest was, I'm sure, audible. And I apologize for that. It appeared post-production, and it's too late for us to edit that. So thanks for understanding. And moving on. So, as I conclude this podcast and my summary of my discussion with this particular individual online, I think I have to repeat once more is what matters most is what we did in our lives. As Marcus Aurelius once said, the fear should be fear of death, a fear of never having lived. And I think about that almost daily. That's really what it's like to be dying, to think about that. What I've done almost daily. In many respects, I've resorted to a sort of storyteller. I find myself even telling stories to my father about things that happened when I was in elementary school, things that occurred at different points in my life that apparently he has since forgotten. An example was quite recent in that he told me that the weather where he lived was really foggy, and I expressed my fondness for the fog and recalled in a little fog adventure, for lack of a better phrase, that occurred when I was probably in 5th or 6th grade. You see, when I was in 5th or 6th grade, the school would take the students up into the mountains, up into the Rockies for camping trips. And there was one particular trip to where we were socked in with a really thick fog, and really the clouds themselves came in and socked in where we were at in this field, in a kind of a small valley area up in the hills, up in the foothills. And we were walking along this small field, and I swear you cannot see more than 3 feet in front of you from the fog. When suddenly one of the counselors or the adult leaders said, "Everyone, shush, get down on your knees, get down, shush." And we all did. We got down, squatted down, and remained dead silent. And you could hear what sounded like a mass galloping of 100 hooves of what apparently were deer going by just feet away from us in the fog. There was a whole herd of deer migrating, and you could hear it, but you couldn't see it. And so we just laid still. Well, not laid, I should say. We remained still. And tried our best to not move. And you could hear the hooves galloping and moving throughout the valley around us. So close, if there was no fog, my God, we'd be able to touch them. And I'm sure we'd both be startled. But that was a story I told him just recently. And it's little things like that that make up a full life. It's not just, oh, do you remember the time I was held against my will in China? Of course he does. But also, he's taking the time to remember the little things, the little stories that partly made your life your life. And your life is what made you. And that's really what it's like to be dying. To reflecting on all those things. And to really celebrate them as components that, as I said, helped form you into the person you are. And so, yeah, that's a lot of what death is like. At least for me, because I do think I lived a complete life. And I do think I have a million stories to share. And I'm very lucky with respect to that. I'm capable of telling others before I pass what those stories are, thank goodness. And owning them now before I pass away, so they don't disappear along with me into the ether. So in that regard, that's how I would describe death, and how I would describe myself as astronomically lucky to be able to share those experiences. Of course, at the time, I wasn't thinking that. And that's just it. I just lived my life. And that's my advice to anyone. Live your life. Live your life the most you can. Because there is going to come a point where you're going to be auditing your life. And you will be the worst auditor you'll have ever met. You will make the IRS look like kids' gloves. And so I strongly recommend to anyone to live their life as best as they can, as most as they can. Because when you're dying, at least for me, that's all I got. And yeah, I plan to cash in on that, so to speak. And notwithstanding anything else, I wish to thank you for listening in to this short podcast and listening to my ideas and my summary of my discussion online with someone regarding life and death. And I strongly appreciate all my listeners for tuning in and listening intently into my few words that I share before I do meet my demise, which I know is coming closer and closer. And there's just nothing more I can do about it. Also want to apologize, actually, in hindsight. I've listened to some of the segments that have gone through this recording, but is it just me? Or do I sound absolutely stoned out of my mind as I go through this? Well, truth be told, I'm not. I'd have no reason to lie, that's for sure. But, no, I've been totally sober, but for some reason, to me at least, I've sounded completely lit up and stoned as I re-listen to a lot of this podcast. So, perhaps that's what I'm going to call it. My stoned podcast. Even though I most certainly am not. And thank you for tolerating that element that is entirely unintentional. So don't forget to follow the podcast and turn on notifications too. You can't just follow. It's not unlike YouTube. You don't just follow things that does nothing. You have to ring the bell. You have to turn on the bell. It could be a bell you click that turns green, like on Spotify and other apps. There's an ellipses of options, like through a menu you have to go through and activate notifications. And yet there's other ways to turn on notifications depending upon the app you use. But please turn on notifications so you're told of new apps as they become available. So I don't have to constantly remind listeners that there is a new podcast that's released. So, thank you for that. If you really want to support the channel, God, we have to plug it in. If you really want to support the podcast, So, again, it's patreon.com/my dog will eat my face, and I will put the link